everyone move up a few rows? This is going to be a more intimate conversation.
I want y'all to come on up a little closer, make it a little more intimate, be able to hear better.
Hi, Michael.
You're probably okay. How you doing, Maria?
I'm good.
And I also saw you. I saw the preview of the video that they're making. No, it's not out yet.
Oh, okay.
But I did see a preview of it on Friday. You were great.
Oh, thank
You had one little line. It was great. I learned to play bridge. I knew it stuck with me. So it was good. Big smile. It was wonderful. Next couple of weeks it'll be coming out. Well, it's going to go at the Women's Philanthropy Luncheon. We're going to use we'll probably do some public TV, some advertising. Is it a men's event? Is it the meeting? Pretty much every chance we get.
Wow. Thank you.
Okay, welcome back everyone. We're about to begin the morning breakout session. That's it. And so those of you who've attended in past years know that we usually do a course called Israel 101, which is Introduction to Zionism. Covers the history from the beginning of the Zionist enterprise up to the present day. And this year we decided to do something a little different. And we decided that instead of looking inward, we might look a little bit more outward at the Arab world. And many of you, if you've been following some of the news, you might have come across the names of all kinds of communities scattered throughout the Middle East. You've got the Sunnis and the Shiites and the Kurds and the Copts and the Maronites and the Druze, and there are Jews as well. Quite a large selection. And what we've done is we've asked one of the world experts on this field to come and tell us more about that. And with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Professor Josef Olmert. Professor Olmert is both a scholar of the Middle East and an actor in the Middle East, in Middle Eastern politics and history. And so while he currently is an adjunct professor at South Carolina University and has taught at several other universities in the US and abroad, he's also served as director of Israel's government press office under Prime Minister Shamir, and was a member of the Israeli delegation at the Madrid peace talks with Syria, and so brings a lot of the insight onto those processes and what was happening at the time. He also headed up the Syrian and Lebanon desk at Tel Aviv University's Moshe Dayan Center for Middle Eastern and African Studies. He's authored several books on the Middle East, and many scholarly and popular articles, and he contributes to the Huffington Post and is a frequent guest on Fox News Channel. And I'm sure Peter will do a much better job when he introduces Professor Olmert at the keynote in the afternoon. So with that,
thank you very, very much, and thank you for inviting me. And as I said to Peter already last night, I feel at home here because my two previous visits in California ended up one time at Irvine with 8 police cars escorting me out of the place. Yes, that's your California. And they used to say California dreaming. And in my second visit, there were 16 police cars. I don't exaggerate. And therefore, when I heard about the incident with Ambassador Oren, I wrote to him, and he's a friend, I said to him, you should have talked to me ahead of time. I would have briefed you about it. And last month, however, I was in San Diego State University, where I was invited to a seminar. They were organized by a certain professor, needless to say Jewish, therefore he's anti-Israel. And he brought his class to the meeting, and 7 of them came with anti-Israel posters. So I said to him, they are here, I'm out. I'm not going to talk with this situation. You invited me as a guest to an academic seminar, and you will respect me as such, because a week earlier there was a Palestinian speaker and no one came with posters against her. So he said, well, it's about freedom of speech and all this, Said to him, freedom of speech or not, they are in, I'm out. They were out. So that's just a prelude, no regard to the talk itself, just to tell you about the atmosphere in some campuses. But I'm coming from the University of South Carolina, where the atmosphere is the opposite. There you can't say a bad word about Israel, because why? There are so many Christians there. I know you will not like to hear that, but I need to tell you the truth. I need to tell you the truth. And that's another story altogether. We can talk about that as well, but that's not so much about the Middle East. Look, one-on-one is a big subject, which means that I can speak about whatever I like. So after I listened to my old friend Alon Ben David, an old friend of mine, so I decided to specify my comments on what's really happening in the Middle East now in terms of the more profound reasons. And of course, the ethnic and other issues will be brought to the fore in my talk, including the new war that takes place in the Middle East, which you have never heard about. It's called the Sushi War. Sunnis, Shiites. And by the way, you think that I invented it? It's an Arab who invented it. That's true, yeah. He's an Arab American who invented the term, claiming that that indicates that in the end of the day they are really good friends, but. Okay. What is happening now, which is called the Arab Spring, is a very interesting situation because, first of all, let's talk about terminology. If you go back in history, 19th century, the Spring of Nations in Europe, 1848, which led to catastrophes all over the place. So when you use a term like the Arab Spring, that in itself creates a sense that it's going to be a very good something, And unfortunately or not, some big commentators, including our good friend Thomas Friedman from the New York Times, otherwise known as the Liberal Bible, as you know, the New York Times, he immediately wrote about the new Middle East. It's going to be a very old Middle East. In Egypt itself, the only difference is between one general called Mubarak and another called Sisi. But it's a good change from our perspective. But altogether, the Arab Spring is not a new phenomenon, by the way, in the modern history of the Middle East. So the first point would be to indicate to you that there were in the past, and I will remind you at least of one, and the older people among us, people like me, would remember, there was in the 1950s a much bigger popular eruption in the Middle East. It was called another name. It was called Nasserism, under Jamal Abdel Nasser, the leader of Egypt. That was much more significant in terms of what happened then and later in the Middle East and what is happening now. And it's very interesting that we don't always look back behind our shoulder to see what really happened so that we can understand what is happening now, what will happen. That will be the gist of some of my remarks later on about the historic narrative in terms of Israelis and Palestinians. Nasserism was much more influential than what is happening now. And those of us who remember it will remember that it wasn't with Twitter or Facebook or all the rest of it. It was with the radio of the Arabs from Cairo. And when Nasser gave a speech, 100 million Arabs were tuned. And there was a civil war in Lebanon. There was the revolution in Iraq. There was the 2 attempts on the life of King Hussein in Jordan. There was the union between Syria and Egypt, which was an unprecedented, unique case in the history of the 20th century where one state voluntarily decided to hand itself over to another under the name of an ideology. And that was already happening, and then we know what happened later and how it ended. It was a total counter situation with a total frustration and disappointment and all that came afterwards. So the first point to be made here is that there are apparently some basic fundamental issues in the Arab world that cannot find expression other than eruptions of protests that leads to violence. And therefore, let's see what these problems are. A, what it is not. It is not Arab-Israeli conflict. For so many years, there was this sense that when you talk about the Middle East crisis, you talk about Israelis and Palestinians or Israelis and Arabs. That's the problem. Which implied, whether it was said like that or not, which implied that if you resolve this problem, you resolve the problems of the Middle East. Which then led to another implication. Put the pressure on Israel. They're our friends, they're from the West, they're like us, so put the pressure on them and that will be great. Paradise on earth. No, that's not the case. That's not the case. And it is a very embarrassing situation for Arabs today when they write about all that. There still are attempts that are becoming less and less credible to try to somehow still link all this to some kind of devious Israeli influence. Among the people who do it is this idiot moron Richard Falk, who teaches in your university here, that you need to read what he says. These very days, I just reviewed a book about Syria where this moron said, Syria problem? How to resolve it? To denuclearize Israel. That's a solution to the Syria problem. But this is becoming marginal and episodal. It still is there. It still is there. You know, all the habits die hard, and all the idiots die hard. Pardon me for saying it. I'm really mocking him in many of my articles. I expect a response. Oh, I'm waiting for that. He doesn't, you know. He's Jewish, by the way. He is, yeah. At least he says he is. Okay. That doesn't mean that because it is not the main problem in the Middle East, we do not need as Israel do whatever it takes from us for our own interest to resolve the problem with the Palestinians. That doesn't mean it. So when I say it's not the main issue, it is not to indicate to you, therefore we do not need to do anything about the peace process. That's not my aim or intention. What I'm trying to tell you is the truth is it is not really the main issue in the Middle East. It is not. And it is something that many people find difficult to understand because it ruins and demolishes their entire line of argument for so many years. They find it hard to adjust themselves to other situations. One of my articles I wrote, they are burning Syria, in Syria they are burning Iranian and Hezbollah flags, not Israeli flags. And you may not see it here. On YouTube, every night I have the dubious pleasure of looking at what's happening in Syria, and then I share it with my wife. Oh, she can't see it anymore. They burn the Iranian flags there all the time. They burn the Israeli flag. Do they like us? No. But that's, you know. Point number 2. How can we predict an eruption? And therefore it would lead us to the background for that. We can predict it by looking at how people live in those countries. Because in the end of the day, they are like us. They're normal people. They want to have a good life. They want to have food. They want to have education. They want to have employment. They want to have water. They want to have everything that normal people would like to have. Here is a story to you that I'm sure none of you heard about. Because your media doesn't tell you this. After 9/11, when it became apparent, to say apparent is like understatement, when it became clear that there is a problem with the Islamic world, the UN, you'll be surprised to hear that, commissioned a group of Arabs, forget about Americans or Israelis, Arabs, to look into the roots of grievances in the Arab world. What's going on there? What's the problem? Why are they so wakeful to what's going on? And every year since 2002, there is a human development report of the UN about the Arab world. You want to know what happened in 2010 and onward? Read this report. Where all those Arab experts explain basically what does it mean, poverty, corruption, authoritarianism, hatred, neglect, sectarianism, all the problems that you have in the Arab world. Without even mentioning anything about Israel or whatever, but simply gave a report. And this is the kind of stuff you never read about, because it doesn't fit into the mold of the Arab-Israeli conflict or any particular immediate problem that you can explain in a soundbite of 30 seconds. But that requires much more than that. So this is also something to understand. These reports were damning reports about the state of affairs in the Arab world. They basically explain how every almost region of the world is moving upwards in almost every category of human development. The Arab world is going down. That's a fact. It's going down. From every possible criteria or yardstick or whatever that you would look at and try to make a comparison, this is the state of affairs. So, and by the way, in one of the reports, the experts said it's going to erupt. It's going to explode. Now, point number 3, where are the main issues? The main issues are in the fact, A, that most of the states of the Middle East have never been legitimate political entities. They have been creations of a situation that was the combination of local conditions with the foreign interference. The last legitimate political entity in the Middle East, I don't talk about Israel, I talk about the other side, was the Ottoman Empire. Surprisingly, it was an Islamic state that was accepted as the inheritor and carrier of all this long tradition of Islam in the Middle East and all that. It became too weak towards the First World War and all that, and then states were created. When students of mine get from me the reading list for the course on Middle East politics, and of course they don't read anything, so I'm already giving up on saying it's mandatory reading. I'm now saying highly recommended reading, which is, you know, they don't read. Yes, the internet is killing a lot of, that's, everybody will tell you. So the book about Lebanon, for example, is Inventing Lebanon. A book about Iraq, Churchill basically established Iraq in 1921, is Churchill's Folly, and so on and so forth. And what you see really happening is that as of 1920 onwards, the Arab world tried to establish a political situation whereby the new states would be accepted by their own people, would be legitimate. And what creates legitimacy of the state? There has to be some kind of a common heritage, some kind of a common legacy, some kind of sharing values, some kind of a raison d'etre which is going beyond differences between social classes or sectarian groups. But here is the problem. The entire notion of the Islamic State was that you can be a member of the state only through your religious community. That is to say, religion and sect have become the collective sign of solidarity. And then, of course, here is a problem. Take Syria now, so that we are becoming more concrete. Take a country like Syria. And if I give you the entire demographic breakdown of Syria, you will be tired of hearing all those 20 or so groups that are there. You know, it's much more than what people think. But say, for example, you have 12% of people who are called Alawites. And they are not even Muslims. 700 years ago, the great Ibn Taymiyyah, the Sunni scholar of Syrian history, 700 years ago, who became later on, I mean, he died, but his teachings became the basis of the Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia, which may explain to you why the Saudis and the Syrians today are like this. But again, something that your press would not ever tell you. Ibn Taymiyyah said about the Alawites, kill them all, because they are worse than the infidels. And the Prophet, Muhammad, said, Kul kufr mila wahida, in Arabic means all the infidels are one nation. And to say if the Alawites are worse than all the nations of the world, you know what you have to do with them. They are boycotted, don't touch them, don't eat with them. So long as you have a Muslim state in which the Alawites live in a small, remote, mountainous area which is, you know, far away from the center, who cares? But when you become an independent state, what is the basis of the relationship between these people that you say you need to kill and the new state? Why would they still be doomed to be this persecuted, harassed minority that used to be throughout the history? The pariahs of history. Then you have to create a new common solidarity, a new basis of living together. And that's exactly what they failed to do in Syria or in Iraq with all their Sunni, Shia, Kurdish, whatever, or Lebanon, of course. They've never been able in any of those countries, but for one, we'll see, to create a real common notion of collective solidarity that binds people together. and therefore legitimize a political entity which is now based on interplay between various groups, not based on domination. The Sunni Muslims cannot accept minorities because they believe they are the ones who have to rule the world of Islam. What is Sunnah in Arabic? It means the road of the Prophet. Therefore, those who are not Sunnis are against the Prophet. So they cannot accept the notion that somehow they will not be in control. The only country in the Middle East where it is not like that, it's Egypt. Egypt is a different case altogether, and you see it even with what is happening now. Because I know it sounds cynical, I know it sounds almost like terrible, but when you look at the situation in Egypt as of 2011 to now, 1,500 people were killed in a nation of 90 millions. In Syria, 250,000 people in a nation of 22 millions. That's a difference. Because the Egyptians have a much greater basis of solidarity that is going back thousands of years. It's a distinct geopolitical unit. It's a sense of commonality. The demographic situation is 90% Sunnis, 10% Copts, who, by the way, suffer a lot. A little story about that. I have an Egyptian Christian girl in my class. So where are you from, Lydia? Well, I'm from this and that city in South Egypt. I said to her, nonchalantly, of course, I'm Israeli, I have to be, I said to her, oh, I read that there was a church being burned there recently. She said, one church? All of them. All of them. But it's 90%, 10%. There's a much greater sense of solidarity and commonality. And when you look at the history of Egypt, you see much less internal violence and bloodshed than any other Arab country. Because when people say to me, how can Bashar Assad do it to his people? I'll tell you the story, they are not his people. He does it to other people, he does it to the Sunnis. He doesn't do it to his people, he does it to other people. He does it to those who oppressed him for 1,000 years. I'm not trying to justify this, I'm just giving you the picture. So, all those countries did not manage to create a real element of commonality based on sharing values and all that. What you would call civic society. But where is civic society in Arab countries? There isn't. There isn't. What they also failed to do was to use the Arab-Israeli conflict as the binding element. Didn't work. Didn't work. I'll give you an example about Syria that will surprise you. I wrote an article about that was published a year ago by the Israeli magazine, the magazine of the Israeli Association of Foreign Affairs, whatever it's called exactly. Bashar Assad was offered by 3 successive Israeli prime ministers 99+% of the Golan Heights. All he had to do was to take it. But he didn't. And I tell you why, he proved right from his perspective. Because the Iranians told him, God forbid, don't do that. And he knew that as an Alawite, whatever he would do was be seen by the others as a betrayal, so he preferred Tehran over the Golan Heights. That's sectarianism. And just one example, I can give you many more such examples. That's sectarianism. It also shows to you that the centrality of the Arab-Israeli conflict is not there. He was offered the Golan Heights. He was offered. And he said no, because he would have lost the support of the Iranians in that case, and now you see from what's happening over there how he needs the Iranian support to preserve his own regime. So for him to maintain the Alawites is more important than all the blah, 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 blah about Israel. And there is so much blah, blah, blah. Then there is another point. Go beyond the conflict. The Arabs really are united in many ways. One cannot unite. They have the same language. Language is culture. The written language, it's culture. The dialects spoken different. Particularly the Egyptian Arabic, the North African Arabic, the Yemenite Arabic, they're totally different. So you could expect to see the emergence of regional ideologies that will unite them on the basis of cultural commonality. And that goes even beyond the Arab-Israeli conflict. So pan-Arabism, Arab nationalism, it failed. It failed. Nasser brought it to a resulting dramatic success with the union with Egypt, and then it all broke down because of the various forces that were pulling away. And then the inability to find an alternative ideology. Already 30 years ago, a famous Arab, Fuad Ajami. Did you hear about Fuad Ajami? He's a Lebanese Shiite. He's the Noam Chomsky of the Arabs. By the way, I debated with Noam Chomsky on television in Canada for a full hour in 1985. It's bad news, trust me. It's really bad news. But Fuad Ajami is the Noam Chomsky of the Arabs. And he wrote already in 1979 his famous article, The End of Pan-Arabism. And then he wrote the famous book about the dream palace of the Arabs, how they all live in a world of illusions, but the reality is so much different. Then came all kinds of other ideologies, Arab socialism. And by the way, they did a lot of good things in some Arab countries. Agrarian reform, raising the levels of education. And even today, you know how many people are illiterate in Egypt? Anyone has any idea? Almost 50% are still illiterate in Egypt. Almost 50%. Did you see when there were elections in Egypt, they had pictures. But these are the people that Thomas Friedman do not meet. He meets those who use Twitter and Facebook. There are a group. There are others. So you talk here about Egypt, with all the fact that it was open for modernization much before other Arab countries, being occupied by the British already in 1882, much before the French and others came. And still, so Arab socialism failed, which leads to the next point. What's the one ideology which is always there? But, you know, Islam. You don't need to explain Islam. You don't need to elaborate. You don't need to elucidate. You don't need to clarify. All you need is to go to the mosque on Friday. And the preacher will tell you, the imam will tell you what is the solution. Islam al-Hal, as it said in Arabic. Islam is the solution. Islam has always been there. There's nothing new about it. All the people who tell you, as of 2001, 9/11, God, well, that's nonsense. Islam has always been there. There was only one short period of time from the end of the First World War when the Ottoman Empire was defeated and Ataturk had this revolution in Turkey, which, by the way, was a miracle. Because imagine that even Turkey, all those 8 years, would have been still an Islamic state like Iran is now today. But God forbid what could have happened. 80 million here, 80 million there, you know. So the Muslim Brotherhood sprang up in Egypt in 1928. This was the beginning of the new Islamic era. What's new about it? What's new about it, by the way, is, and this is not to criticize only your press and all that, is that you know about it only when it immediately, directly affects whatever American interest. And I'm not saying it in a patronizing or critical way. I'm just giving you the description of it. What's new about the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt? But they've been around for all those years. They always try to kill every Egyptian ruler. They killed them back. What's new about it? But then go back to Mubarak. Go back to before him Sadat. You know, Sadat, when he came to Jerusalem, everybody noticed he had a little something on his forehead. You know what the joke about him was? Of course he has it because he bows down 5 days a day to pray. They all pray. They're all religious. That's not the debate about religion. The debate is about the role of it in controlling the country and who would do that. So I heard it from an Islamic expert on Iran, an Islamic Iranian woman, in a conference years back. She said, what do you think is the difference between what happened under the Shah and what happens under Khomeini? It's a very simple difference. Under the Shah, they drank alcohol outside and prayed inside. Under Khomeini, they pray outside, drink alcohol inside. They've always been. Well, they are, nothing has changed. It's only you think that something has changed. That's what you think. So, Islam has always been there. There's nothing new about it. And the resort to Islam is naturally inevitable and unavoidable because everything else failed. Everything else failed. And after all those changes, you still come back to a situation whereby Egypt, is having nominally, they exaggerate, but nominally per capita income of $5,000 a year. And Israel, $38,000 a year. And hopelessness is there for a simple reason. Because you take Egypt, it's a little mathematical exercise now, I don't want to bore you. Imagine that you want to raise the per capita income of Egypt from 5,000 to 6,000 a year, big deal. You need to have an economic growth of 20% a year. It's impossible. Even in China, it's only 8%. Or in India. There's to say there's hopelessness. There's nothing to wait for, to expect. And that brings it always to the court of the Muslims, the Islamists. Because what they have to offer does not need to be corroborated by statistics. It can be corroborated by the message and by going back to the past. Remember when it was great? But, what's the difference after all is that we may have had the luck of having a Muslim Brotherhood government for 1 year in Egypt. And what happened in Egypt in this 1 year was very simple. You know what happened? Nothing. Nothing happened. I'll tell you what did happen. And I must tell you, I was surprised to read it. I didn't even myself, even though that I'm such a genius, but I wrote a book about my notes in the Middle East. Liberal though, but still, I didn't realize that in Egypt there are 600,000 Shiites out of 90 million people. There was a period in the history of Egypt when a Shiite dynasty, the Fatimids, were in control, and they built Al-Azhar, which is the main academic school, which is of course Sunni since then, but was Shiite. You know what they did with them? They killed them. Not all of them, but they murdered Shiites because 600,000 out of 90 million. It's terrible, right? It's a drag on the economy of Egypt. Who got on board? You want to hear something that will even surprise you more? Take Malaysia now. It's in the news. They have 18 million Sunni Muslims and only 40,000 Shiites. You know what they did last year with the Shiites? Outlawed Shia Islam. That's the biggest problem. That's the biggest problem. 40,000 Shiites among the 18 million Muslims. And they resolve the problem, as we see now. That's it, no problems. So that's a problem. Now, one of the reasons why you don't hear about sectarianism so much, let's understand it. Because in the academic world, there is a built-in strong opposition to tell you the truth what's happening in the Arab world. Why? All the neo-Marxists would never accept that there can be problems in society which are not based or predicated only on economic issues, because that's against Marxism. Other Arabs would not like to admit that tribalism and confessionalism and sectarianism, whatever you would call it, is there because it's a shame, it's embarrassing. There's another reason that plays to Israeli propaganda, because that's what the Israelis say. We are one of those minorities that you don't like to accept. And so on and so forth. You cannot use certain terms in the academic world today in America. I don't talk about other countries. When I taught at American University in DC, American University, not the best university, but a good one, there were classes in which professors said to the students, do not use the word tribe. No, do not. So I wake up one Saturday morning, so I prepare to watch soccer on television because that's the real game, not the football. So yeah, Americans believe that football is a great game. Now I know that I lost you completely. Not clever, I understand. I say to my media class, I also give a class on media and foreign policy because I used to be a government spokesman. I tell them, how many people watch the Super Bowl? 100 million people, it's great. And how many people watch the Mundial in soccer? 2.5 billion. No. That's the difference. So I wake up one Saturday morning, and I get an email from a colleague, woman professor at American University. She's an Arab Christian woman. And she writes to me, I'm angry at you. What's you know, always angry at the Jews, yeah. So she says, because Ibrahim, your student, and he's Sunni Muslim and Palestinian and pro-Hamas, but he liked me because we talked truth. Ibrahim said to me in class, all I know about the Middle East comes from the Jew, not from you. So I wrote back to her, hey, look, put me between an Arab Christian and Arab Muslim. It's too much, don't put me in the middle of all that. But the point was that there was a discussion between them. It was already after the beginning of the Arab Spring and all that, before I came to South Carolina. And he talked to her, sure, it's sectarianism. And she couldn't accept it, So of course it came back that the Israeli professor incited him. It's like otherwise. Look, it's there, sectarianism is there. They are starting to come to grips with it much more. It took many people over a year to say that the Syrian civil war is sectarian. They couldn't bring themselves to admit it. There still is a big debate in various places in the Arab world about all that, because it is something that they look at it as a sign of the lack of modernity and all the rest of it. There's an interesting, fascinating article written by Aaron David Miller, if you know the name of it. He was one of the Baker team for talks at that time. When we were there in Madrid. He's now appearing a lot on television. He wrote an article about tribes with flags. Tribes with flags. And he's Jewish, he's pro-Israel in his way, so people might have looked at it like, oh, it's another. No. This is the beginning of the recognition that starts to filter through. Hey, look, there are various big fundamental issues which would therefore lead to some inevitable political solutions. If you look at Syria, there will be 5 or 6 Syrians. There will be the Kurdish state in the northern eastern part of Syria. And by the way, the Kurds are the largest ethnic group in the Middle East without any state, 30 million people. Nobody talks about them. It's only about the Palestinians. And that's something that we have to handle. I'll refer more to it later on in my other talk. There will be a Druze state in the southern part of Syria, not so far away from our borders, and that could be not bad to us because they are a very interesting minority that knows how to handle themselves. They will speak against Israel and do everything for Israel. That's part of the game. There will be the Alawite state, Alawistan, which is already there in the mountains. There will be 2 or 3 Sunni states that will kill each other because of the different factional rivalries between various Islamic groups. And somehow it will come to an end. I don't know, it will be another 200, 300,000 people killed. Well, God forbid, I hope not. There already are 3 states in Iraq. And when your Vice President Joe Biden said about 3 states in Iraq way back, people made fun of him. He's not stupid at all. He's wrong about Israel, but he was right about that. By the way, I had dinner with him in Tel Aviv ahead of the Iraq war in 2002, December of 2002, and he predicted exactly what would happen in Iraq. It's very interesting. The other participant in the dinner was Chuck Hagel, the current Secretary of Defense. He was Republican and Democrat, and they predicted what would happen in Iraq later on. And Joe Biden said, look, I understand the sectarian rivalry and all that. There is a Kurdish not self-declared, but virtual autonomy in northern part of Iraq. The Sunnis and the Shiites are still fighting wherever they live together, but South Iraq is Shiite, they fight in Baghdad and all that. And Lebanon is, by all accounts, divided. Libya is now going to be divided between the West and the East, which is nothing new. Yemen, they speak now about division into 6 sub-states within one federation. Because, you can say whatever about Yemen, a nation it is not. It's all tribalistic, Sunnis and Shiites and all that. And this is going to be a new Middle East. In a situation like that, and I'm finishing because Peter, in a situation like that, 2 states are emerging, perhaps 3, as the, or even 4 to an extent, as the most important state. One of them called Israel. Israel. And by the way, look at this. Imagine you have a street with 50 houses. In 49 houses there is a fire. There's 1 house without a fire, but the fire department goes to the 1 house without fire and says, you do something before there is fire. There's already fire. That's what they do now. Solve the problem with the Palestinians because what? There's already fire everywhere else. Here there isn't. By the way, we should do it anyway. Just saying, So Israel is strong. Iran is still there and got a lease of life by this agreement as alone explain. Egypt is always Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. But the days of Saudi Arabia are numbered, and this is my last point, which will be very, of course, optimistic prediction. Now, look at the Middle East. If you still have anything in the Middle East which keeps it from complete poverty and starvation, is that they still have oil, right? In 10 years' time, they will find solutions, alternatives to oil. 10, 12, 15 years' time, they're working on it in Israel, by the way, now, they're working on it in America and all that. Imagine the Middle East that doesn't feed the world anymore with oil. You understand what will happen there? You understand what will happen there? So the prediction, therefore, as much as I would like to cheer you up, and to send you back home, well, I can't. Going to be bad, but as Alon said, to be a Jew, to be an Israeli, and to be a Zionist is by definition to be optimistic. Why? Because we are the only ones who survived 3,000 years. Thank you very much. The chairman.
Thank you very much. With 9/11, we see there are some Arab Muslims that hate America very much. They're willing to die for that. What does America represent or have done that people are willing to die to terrorize us? What are some of the main reasons in your opinion?
There is, look, it's a great question. And I'll tell you something before I get into the immediate answer. Of all the Western powers, America has traditionally been the greatest supporter of Arabs in the Middle East. You go back to the 19th century and see what the Americans did with the establishment of the American University of Beirut, which was the first academic institution of foreigners in the Middle East to teach in Arabic, which enhanced Arabism, nationalism, and all that, and became, by the way, an hotbed of anti-Israel and anti-Jewish, but that's something else. Now, by the way, in 1984, the president of the American University of Beirut, Malcolm Carroll, a member of one of the families of the missionaries, was murdered by the Hezbollah. And that's the answer. America inherited the name West. America has become the bogey of everything that you are against, as much as Britain and France were before. This is not about America, it's about East and West. When you come to my class on the Middle East, which you haven't yet come, but if you invite me to teach here at Santa Barbara, I may consider it. I'll tell you the following, of course, alongside Richard Falk. I'll tell you the following, that the term East and West are geographic, but much more so religious and cultural. And you go back to Europe, prior to the First World War, they refer to the Near East. Today they say Middle East. What was the Near East? The Near East was every place where there are Muslims, so it's East. Why is it near? Because the Ottoman Empire still controlled parts of what is today Yugoslavia and the Balkans and all that. So it was near. So the real division was along religious lines, East and then near. And America became the leader of the Western world after the Second World War. America became associated with everything that they were against before, and now America inherited the role of being the leader of the Western world. Of course, America may have made this or that mistake with regard to the anti-Mossad coup in Iran in 1953. The very recognition of Israel, okay, you can go on and on like that. It would have happened anyways. And here is a story for you. These two Chechen guys, they do what they do in Boston. I don't know if I have to be proud of that or not, but Fox News on occasions call me and they ask me for commentary that particular day. I was in New York, so they put me there. Then the interviewer said to me the following, which is very interesting. It's a little illuminating example of, he says, but I don't understand. the Chechens were always oppressed by the Russians. Why would they hate America? Which is, by the way, very true. As of the 19th century, there is an ongoing war between the Chechens and Russia. Stalin took the Chechens in the Second World War, threw them to Siberia, Central Asia and Siberia, because this was Russia. By the way, did it to the Muslims of the Crimea now, that you hear about them now. So I said to him, you don't understand. It's not about Russia, it's about the West. And the West is America. This is what it is. Now, of course, in a session like that, you can't expect me to go much beyond just 2 or 3 minutes, you know. There is a problem here. Now, to qualify what I said, I don't know how many Muslims were happy about 9/11. There's no way to check it. Over 1 billion Muslims, 1.5 billion, how do we know? There were enough that were happy enough to create another 10 generations of terrorists, even if they're a small minority. So the problem really is that we need to understand that if we deal with a society like that, we need to look at it from a societal perspective as the headline and then to go into details and see what can be done about it. On a societal level, I don't see much that we can do. Unless it comes from them. And what you hear now is by some optimistic Americans, or maybe they're realistic and I'm not, maybe they're delusional. They speak about the civil war in the world of Islam between the moderates and the extremists. I still don't see it happening, but if it is, it is. It's not in Egypt. It's not a civil war between moderate and extremists. It's a civil war between those who want power from this perspective and those who want it from another. I promise you, Marshal Sisi, when he becomes president, trust me, the results of the elections are already known now. They know what will be the results. He will talk in the name of Allah and all that, and you know, he will play the game because he is a believer, I'm sure. Maybe in Turkey there is a war like that. What's happening now, and unfortunately Erdogan still won the election, so I don't know, you know, we'll see. It has to come from this society whereby it has to be them who for this or that reason, first of all, put down the militants and then try to create a dialogue with us on the basis of whatever it is. How to do it, I don't know. You can argue that sending the drones in Pakistan is not the way to dialogue. Okay, so let's see what else can be done. You know, I give my students liberty. I tell them, write about whatever you like. Your papers has somehow connection to the Middle East, fine with me. And I'm a fanatic soccer fan, so they write about soccer in the Middle East and all that, but write a lot about Pakistan after what happened with this girl Malala. And I learned from their papers because they I was surprised to hear, for example, that in Pakistan, after all those years of American help and aid, the number of people that go to religious Islamic madrasas that educate against America is all the time on the rise. Because the state has not given any alternative. The only ones who give them are these. So there has to be many things happening here. More welfare, but spent in a way that would benefit the population at large, and whatever. Also, perhaps, a solution to our problem with the Palestinians that may ease up some of the pressures. Maybe yes, maybe no. Okay. But it cannot be done by us. It has to be done initially, first and foremost, by them. Because otherwise it would be imposition from the outside. It would be coercion from the outside. And that's one of the things that we fail to understand time and again. I'll give you just one example. Where is here this? It's already bored with me. We leave Gaza 2005. Dismantling all the settlements. That's not about settlements now, it's about something else. There are greenhouses in Gaza. Do you know the story of the greenhouses?
Yes, yes.
The World Bank comes to the government of Israel and tells them, you know what, you leave, the settlers are angry, let's do something that will be beneficial to everybody. We'll buy the greenhouses from the settlers and we'll keep them intact, give them to the Palestinians. And $14 million were invested in it. So what did they do? They banned them. Because they would not eat Zionist lettuce. They will not.
We have,
So this is cultural. They're not stupid. This is cultural. This puts also in perspective a lot of what people say about economic cooperation. Should be. I wish it would be. But to accept economic cooperation with Israel when you are here and we are there, it means to accept inferiority towards the other side that you don't like. This is cultural. This is cultural. You understand? So you ask me why they hate America. Put it all together. They hate the Western world. They hate the West. America is the leader of the West. And therefore, put in perspective all the speeches of Barack Obama is a great guy. I mean, I'm not, I by the way, defend him a lot in some of my African Post articles, not because it's African Post, which is pro-Obama. I have a different opinion about that. What didn't he do? I'm telling you that Voice of America and other official American organs are not supposed to say anything critical about Islam. I know it. He went to Istanbul. He went to Indonesia. He went to Cairo. Look, it is not 1 or 2 or 3 speeches. It has to be much. It has to come from there. It has to, the very last point. And you need to know the truth. And you need to know the truth. So that when Lara Logan from CBS is covering the Tahrir Square riots and she is raped, gang raped in front of hundreds of people there, and there is a cover-up, and then she comes back to America and tells it, and CBS say, oh yeah, we wanted to make sure that she would safely leave and all that and so on and so forth. You know the story? Did you know the story? You need to know the truth. We need to have a truthful dialogue. We need to know what's going on. And this is not to promote hatred or disregard or disrespect to them. On the contrary. In my class, I had a big fight last week with a group of evangelical Christians, that's the South, because I told them, I ask you, I don't demand from you, I don't require you, but I ask you, when you write the name Muhammad, write the Prophet Muhammad. He said, no way. It was a false prophet, we should never do something like that. Our pastor said that. Oh. So again, it has to be a truthful dialogue from each perspective to find out really what's happening, even if the conclusions are so bad. And therefore, articles like Thomas Friedman after Tahrir, the new history, I'll talk about this later on in my other lecture to develop this point a little bit, are not there. You can't obliterate and erase centuries of whatever just by stating your good intentions. And that will take time. And we'll see. I wish I could be more forthcoming.
So in a couple minutes, we're going to have a lot of people coming through to lunch, so I think we have time for one more. I don't know if this works. Speak loud.
I have a flight later on, I can stay.
If the majority of the people in the Middle East believe that there is this economic plan, a Commonwealth plan, promoted by Israel, vigorous by Israel, and developed by sober economists and businessmen throughout the Middle East, and if he believed his life would be better if this plan was implemented and there was a corresponding decrease in violence, would that be strong enough to end some of this sectarian
That will definitely
madness?
be helpful, but this is not the solution, unfortunately. And by the way, one of the reasons for that, first of all, it will be helpful. Should it happen? Yeah. Can it happen? I'm not sure. But look, the problem that we have in the Middle East is, and I say something that may be misunderstood after first second, and then you'll understand. We really do not belong there in one sense at least. Our economy is supersized, high-level, Western advanced economy. We are different than them. What can we offer them? What can Teva company, do you expect Teva company to have a factory in Egypt where people are being paid $150 a month?
Sounds like a great opportunity.
Yeah, okay, so I tell you what they do. They took all the textile plants that were in Arab and Druze villages in Galilee, where the minimum wage in Israel is $750 or $800, and put them in Gaza or Egypt or Jordan. And then they paid them $150. You can't create this type of economy when you have 50% 45% illiterate and all that. And quite frankly, we can do tourism together. Imagine you land in the peaceful Syria, in Palmyra, in the desert. You go to Baalbek in Lebanon, Petra, Jerusalem, and the pyramids. Can you think of a better tour? Okay, tell them. I'm in favor. Totally in favor. The only problem is they're not. You know, I have a colleague, by the way, University of South Carolina. She wrote a book about that. She co-edited with the liberal illusion. Okay, that's South Carolina, you know. The liberal illusion about economic relations as being the solution for peace. But I agree with you. We can do more, by the way, as Israel. We can do more. We can. We should do more. But this is not the solution.
Dr. Olmert, I have to let you and everybody else know that it is lunchtime.
Oh, really? Okay. That's the culture, huh?
Let's find a seat in the shade.
Well, I didn't reach everything, but I thought it was going to.
They don't paint a pretty picture. In our lifetime, in our children's
I came away almost hopeless.
Yeah, I'm not getting that, but not
feeling as though
Every time I don't bring my hat, I'm pissed off at myself.